This podcast is brought to you by Free Buddhist Audio, the Dharma for your life. Our work is funded entirely by donations from our generous listeners. If you would like to help us keep this free, make a contribution at freebuddhistaudio.com/donate. Thank you, and happy listening.
Okay, hello. So we are coming towards the end of our theme. So this is the penultimate night of our theme. It's been running for quite a while now. The Way to the Deathless, exploring awareness in all its many dimensions. Next week will be the last night, so this is the penultimate night. And through this theme, whether you've been aware of it or not, we've mentioned it sometimes, it's not always been so explicit. We've been following the 4 levels of awareness as a structure. We've been going on a bit of a journey. We started off with quite a few weeks looking at awareness of self, moving on to awareness of what's called awareness of things or nature, the outside world, then awareness of others, other people, and then finally we're on awareness of reality, which we looked at last week and we're looking at tonight. So this is the topic of tonight in a particular way, which I'll be introducing soon. So awareness of reality. So Pawanita was unpacking this last week in the context of what are called the 4 reminders. But firstly, it's really important to say awareness of reality doesn't mean thinking about reality. It means sort of what it says, awareness of reality, an awareness that almost becomes reality, a direct seeing, a kind of direct seeing or direct knowing. Last week, Pawanita spoke about this, as I said, in terms of the 4 reminders in particular, one of them being the awareness, the deep knowing, and the transformation that comes about from fully realizing that we're all going to die. And this is often spoken about as insight with a capital I. We hear this word a lot in Buddhism and in meditation practice generally. And insight into the true nature of reality, you might hear that a lot. So this is a metaphor, really important, So we don't take it too literally. Insight is a metaphor. It uses the metaphor of sight, seeing inside. It evokes this sense of, there's something which you don't see, and then you see it, wow, there it is. Like bringing a lamp into a dark room, and suddenly you see what's there. Or like the rising sun dispelling the darkness after a long, dark night. An awareness of something which up until now you were completely blind to, you didn't know was there. You didn't even want to know it was there, perhaps you weren't even looking, you didn't want to look in that direction. It's that direct and wonderful, that's what this kind of word insight has connotations of. Even like being born blind and suddenly being able to see. So not just not seeing something, but not even being able to see, not even knowing what it means to see, and then waking up to, wow, I can see, this is what it's like. How amazing, how wonderful. But the metaphor of sight, insight, is it's not the only way of comprehending what we mean by reality or wisdom or seeing the true nature of things. It's just one way, and it has its downsides, which I'll touch on shortly. So don't take words for granted. This kind of goes generally whenever we're hearing or talking about anything to do with the Dharma, and we use all these words and we trot them out again and again, 3 jewels, awareness, reality, insight, enlightenment, pick your favorite one. And don't try not to take these things for granted and really keep asking, what do we actually mean? Because they're always pointing beyond themselves. They're always metaphors. So what do we mean? So when we say awareness of reality, it kind of all hinges around what we mean by reality. What are we talking about with this word? We sometimes call this enlightenment. So in his book, The 3 Jewels, Sangharakshita, who founded Triratna, so he gives what amounts to something like 7 different ways that you can approach what we mean by enlightenment or reality. This is a text, 3 Jewels, that we study on our ordination retreats. If you're ordained into the Triratna Buddhist order, it's a standard, or part of it is a standard text we study. It's one of the most profound things he's ever written. It's dense, mind-blowing, and has very long sentences. I won't be going into these 7 ways of apprehending enlightenment tonight, but it's important to recognize that that insight, this metaphor of sight, with a particular emphasis on a change in perception, is just one way. Like how we say, you see that death is inevitable. It's like, wow, I see it now. That's just one way of talking about awareness of reality. Today, we're going to be exploring a different way. and one that is arguably more complete, less kind of open to misconceptions, because it involves more imagination and less words, actually. Words can always lead to misconceptions if we're not careful, but words are very important as well. So this other mode, which we'll be exploring tonight, is summarized in a sentence from the Three Jewels, one of the few sentences that was quotable because they're all so long, where he says, "The Buddha is himself the goal, and the goal is the Buddha." So the Buddha is himself the goal, and the goal is the Buddha. Or we might say equivalently, the Buddha is himself reality, and reality is the Buddha. And this is subtly but significantly different to saying the goal is to become like the Buddha. That's true as well, but we're saying it's more than that. Reality is the Buddha. We contact reality by contacting the Buddha, and when we contact the Buddha, we contact reality. When we really contact the Buddha, who the Buddha really is. So we're all heavily conditioned by what we might call scientific materialism. It's kind of the water we swim in our modern culture, though that's probably changing. In this worldview, we tend to see the universe as a sort of giant physics puzzle, this huge, complicated physics puzzle, and then awareness of reality is somehow cracking the puzzle. It's like, you see the way things work, reality is out there somewhere. I just need to sort of see it in the right way. And there it is. I see how it works now, like we've seen how a physics experiment works. And that's reality, like Isaac Newton watching the tree, seeing the apple fall, and gravity. And we kind of think, well, yes, we're sitting there watching the tree, the leaf falls, impermanence. And it's kind of the same thing. I don't want to diss watching leaves fall from trees, or like the profound insight that may arise. Hopefully it will for you one day. But what I'm trying to say is it's more than that as well. It's not just a conceptual understanding, or even an understanding in the way we might usually think about it when we speak about awareness of reality. It's less about understanding, we might say, and I use inverted commas because, as I said, understanding, you can use that word in more profound ways, but in the way we usually think of it. And perhaps more about coming into relation with and opening up to what we might call or experience as a living spiritual force, something that's alive. It's not just a principle, it's not just a sort of mechanical, the way the universe works kind of thing, but something that's alive and that can influence us and be part of our lives. Something which appears to us, seems to appear to most of us anyway, if it does at all, in the form of archetypal images, archetypal Buddhas, bodhisattvas, dreams even, perhaps sometimes as an intuition of what we might call the sort of higher or truer self, again, inverted commas, something that we sense that's bigger than us, yet profoundly, intimately linked to who we really are, what we might call Buddha nature. But yes, something that's somehow embodied, somehow has personhood. And Sangharakshita in The Three Jewels says that personhood is our highest category, and suggests that if our conception of reality is not somehow experienced as being embodied in a being, in a person, then we reduce it to an abstraction. We make it lower than us, because whether we know it or not, anything that's not embodied, anything that's below human, or that isn't embodied in a human form, we kind of relate to as something that's somehow lower. So reality presents itself to us in the form of beings and of persons, and that just seems to be the way things work. I don't know why, but it seems to be how these things work. You might even say, reality, it's not meant to be understood, in that literal sense. The word reality is itself a metaphor, and it's an invitation to open up to something that's bigger, open up to a more beautiful mode of being, which, the Buddha, he doesn't just represent, but he actually is that mode of being. So if you're not somebody that gets on with the archetypal Buddhas and bodhisattvas, that's absolutely fine. We're actually not going to be going there tonight, not in that way anyway. We're going to be looking at the historical Buddha. Though as an aside, ultimately they're not different, so don't worry too much. If you connect with one or the other, they're not different really, ultimately. For the rest of the talk, we're going to be exploring how awareness of the historical Buddha in particular can be a gateway to truth, and how mindfulness of the Buddha is a practice of awareness of reality in its own right. It's a way of contacting reality, not just a means towards becoming wiser. It's actually a way of contacting reality. The Buddha is reality, and reality is the Buddha. All right, so that's the conceptual bit. We're going to be going on a different direction now, in a bit of a different direction. So in the spirit of tonight's theme, we're going to actually be taking a break from concepts and ideas for the most part, though I might not be able to resist throwing some in here and there. So rather than giving more theory, I want to tell you some stories about meetings with the Buddha from my recent journey to India, to be on pilgrimage in India. So this is a bit different. The rest of the talk, it might be a bit different to a usual kind of main Sangha night talk, because I will be speaking quite personally. Often when we kind of get the brief for these talks, we sort of try and we say, it's good to say some personal stuff, but it's mostly about giving the teachings. So I might be, I don't know, we'll see. You can let me know. I might be deviating from this a bit tonight, so hopefully I won't get sacked. But Sangha Gita and Paranita can let me know. Anyway, this is what I'm doing, so you can't stop me. I'm going to do it. Yeah. So yes, telling stories about some meetings with the Buddha, and I say meeting with the Buddha quite on purpose rather than imaginings of the Buddha. So my motivation to go on pilgrimage to see the sites of the historical significant sites of the Buddha was not just to learn about him or remember him or even just to get a better sense of what it might have been like to be with him, though that was all important. I realized, kind of without knowing this was my intention, that I was going to India to meet the Buddha, to sort of have a contact, to see if, I might not, but I wanted to actually meet something of the Buddha. Even though the Buddha died, he did die, or did he? Yes and no. I can only speak personally here, but my experience, my belief, again, I don't know where, I just seem to have noticed, this is just what I believe, is that places of power, places become places of power when significant things have happened there and when significant beings have dwelt there, particularly through spiritual practice and meditation and so on. It's as if, again, my experience, places can hold a signature, a mark from what's happened there and create a sort of wormhole which can contact us to the beings and the consciousnesses that dwelt there. And traditionally, it's said the true nature of the Buddha does go beyond his physical body in ways that is very mysterious and, mysterious. So traditionally, it's said meditating on the Buddha is not just a way of getting us inspired and sort of making us feel, interested in the Buddha and developing his qualities, all of that which can happen. But meditating on the Buddha traditionally can actually put us in contact with the Buddha in a sense, actually connect us to something of who the Buddha really is, which goes beyond his body and his historical presence. Okay, so on Monday, 13th of January, so me and some friends from our Sheffield Sangha, including Shubham, is he here tonight? Yay! Shubham and Alex and Daisy, Laura, and who's the other one? Me, yeah. It was 5. I was trying to think, yeah. Okay. We flew to India, met up with a bunch of other Triratna folk for a pilgrimage organised by a group of Indian order members, and began a 10-day coach journey around India to visit the significant sites of the Buddha, including Isipatana, where the Buddha first communicated the Dharma for the very first time, where the Dharma and the Sangha both came into existence at the same time for the first time. And Lumbini in Nepal, where the Buddha was born. Vulture's Peak, where he and his disciples would meditate in cool caves with incredible views, stunning views of the surroundings, and several other places. But the place that I most vividly encountered the Buddha was a place called Jetta's Grove, also referred to as Anathapindika's Park. So some of you may recognize these names. So Anathapindika's Park was gifted to the Buddha by a man called Anathapindika, a wealthy merchant who was a disciple of the Buddha, who really wanted to support the Buddha and his followers to be able to meditate during the rainy seasons in particular. So after lots of hard work and effort, there's a whole story behind it. He gets this park and gifts it to the Buddha. And the records suggest that he spent something like 23, I don't know the exact number, 23 rainy seasons with him and probably hundreds and hundreds of his followers, monks, meditating there together. About 3 months a year, I guess. Someone might know the figure. I don't know how long the rainy season actually lasts. But anyway, lots and lots of meditation had happened there with the Buddha and his followers and enlightened followers. And not just meditation, but deep, profound meditation that's beyond what we might normally conceive of even as meditation. And yeah, this does leave an imprint. You can feel it in the atmosphere even after hundreds of years. So for me, if anywhere was going to be a particular place to feel like I might contact something of the Buddha, it would be here. So I was very curious about what I would encounter. But before I go forward about what happened next, I'm going to speak a bit more personally about what I was bringing to this experience. Because when we meet the Buddha, if we choose to bring the Buddha to mind, to really meet the Buddha, we have to lay ourselves bare. Everything, including that which seems like not at all Buddhist, deeply shameful even. And this is what I want to just briefly share with you, is that for me, what I felt like was arising for me during this time, what I felt particularly aware of was shame. And not kind of a healthy shame, but what we might call like toxic shame. Hear this word, or irrational guilt, as it's sometimes referred as. Which I won't go too much into the psychology of that, but something what I might describe in my experience as a sort of deeply held, embodied, kind of almost physical, but held onto with such fear and terror belief that there's something fundamentally and deeply wrong with me, or if it's all of us with ourselves. Not even with a story. It's not even a story. It's not a this or a that. It's just this sort of kind of as if in the fiber of things there's something deeply wrong. And I think, it seems that to greater and lesser extent, we all have this to some extent. I wasn't aware of it for many, many years. It's been particularly the last few years I've become more aware of it. And to challenge it, for that to change, feels like knocking on death's door because it's such a deeply held survival strategy. It seems to be. And it's keeping things buried that have been too overwhelming or too threatening to face, which comes with tremendous fear. So yeah, we arrived at Jetta's Grove, and this was with me. I was aware of this. The first thing we did was we walked to a place that was said to be the Buddha's bedroom, where the Buddha slept, higher up because the archaeological remains would have been lower down. But we went and we sat above this spot where the Buddha would have slept. So it wasn't just where he meditated, he slept there, though apparently the Buddha didn't really sleep in the way we usually think of sleep even. Something else was going on. And my experience was, we sat down, I closed my eyes, and it was as if the Buddha then came. I felt him come. And I could feel all this shame and all that fear. It was there in me. It was there in front of me. The Buddha came. He looked at me, he saw all of it, took me right in, looked at me, and without words, without speaking, in just the way he was, and just the way he was looking at me, said, "You're all right. You're all right." With, it's strong to say this, but yeah, just like such a loving smile, "You're all right." He didn't say, "All things are impermanent," or "all things are empty of self-nature." I don't know why I'd speak in that voice, but or "Look, mate, you're going to die. Come on, get a grip." He said, with such tenderness, and just the way he looked at me, he said, "You're all right. You're all right." And this was beautiful and devastating. I was in floods of tears. Shubham was there. I could barely speak. We were trying to report in the Buddha's bedroom, and I couldn't speak. And it had a taste of a truth that was deeper than just my own psychology and past traumas or whatever it might be. It didn't seem to be just about me, because for a while I knew, at least for a little while, I knew and felt that it was true for all of us. We're all right, deep down, we're all right. And more than that, we're more than all right, all right with a capital A. Our deepest and truest nature is that we are naturally free and beautiful and glorious even. And yeah, sometimes I get this sense that for me, my deepest longing is felt as a sense of I so long to be myself, to be truly and deeply myself, and by extension to help others to do the same and to be the same, to open up to who I really am beneath all the stories, all the shame, all the fear, and the deluded prisons that I use to keep myself safe. And that experience, it was like a sense of the Buddha knows more who I am than I do. And not just who I am, again, in a psychological sense, but who I am in my truer essence and truer nature, what it really means to be human. In the sense that, the Buddha, he's not there judging, disapproving. This is how the Buddha, when I'm having like shame projection, sometimes the Buddha would come to me as this kind of like disapproving Buddha, like he's like a bad teacher, looking all shadowy, saying, you need to try harder. You're never going to do it, giving these sort of two options. I either have to not be myself to try and live up to some made up idea of what it means to actually be good enough, or just give up and realize I'm never going to be good enough. But yeah, the Buddha isn't like that, obviously. Well, it's not always obvious, it seems, but he wants nothing more than for each of us to put down the burden, to become truly free and deeply ourselves. So that's the first story. Going to have a little interlude now, not literally, you're not going to go anywhere. I'm going to talk about something else. Commercial break. Just a bit of a practical thing, because I want to tell the next story, but it would be important to say something practical, and I don't want to do it at the end because I don't think it will fit. So I'm saying it now, some practical stuff, because one take way I could have approached this talk, awareness of the Buddha, could have been very practical. How do we practice becoming more aware of the Buddha, so that his influence and his awareness and our awareness can open up to something of reality that comes through when we practice in this way. So yeah, there are lots of traditional practices, lots of ways we can do this. I could list them off like a shopping list, but I'm not going to. I'll mention some. There are meditation practices where we visualize the Buddha. We have our rituals, sevenfold puja, threefold puja, chanting the refuges and precepts. Even just meditating, doing the mindfulness of breathing and bringing to mind that this is what the Buddha taught, and imagine what it'd be like to breathe with the Buddha and to practice with him there. It can be a wonderful way into meditation, any of the practices. But in a way, I'd much rather put the question back to you, and this is an invitation for when we get to the groups as well, is to ask yourself, what would help me to dwell more in the presence and influence of the Buddha? So what would help me? What would help you in your particularity? Because it might be different. It'll be different for each of us. We have to use our imagination and to really look deeply into that question to see, well, even to ask why would we want to? Do we want to do that? So yeah, that's something to talk about in the groups. Put that question to you. As I said, there's many things that could involve. I'll list a few more. I can't resist. Building a shrine, maintaining a shrine, making time to do nothing, just to let the distractions and the fizziness settle a bit, so imagination can come more through. Becoming a mitra is a great one, or asking for ordination. And I'm not just saying that in a cheeky sort of, whatever. I mean, like making a commitment to being a disciple of the Buddha is an excellent way to meet the Buddha, and vice versa. So ways that we can open up and enliven our imagination to bring the sense of an enlightened being into our lives, even if it's not the Buddha, one of the archetypal Buddhas or Bodhisattvas. And we'll be doing this next week very directly. We'll be engaging in some shared practice, evoking the Buddha together. So I really recommend you to come. And if you want a bit of, here's a, sort of conceptual, kind of not, a bit of another plug, since we're in the commercial break. Why do this practice? Why practice awareness of the Buddha if it's not clear already? So Buddha Ghosha, who's a 5th century Buddhist monk and teacher, a great Theravada Buddhist master, he puts it like this. So he says, when a person is devoted to this recollection of the Buddha, they are respectful and deferential towards the master. They attain fullness of faith, mindfulness, understanding, and merit. They have much happiness and gladness. They conquer fear and dread. They're able to endure pain. They come to feel as if they were living in the Master's presence, and their body, when the recollection of the Buddha's special qualities dwells in it, becomes as worthy of veneration as a shrine room. Their mind tends towards the plane of the Buddhas, which could be summarized as you become wise. I think all of that. Yeah, it's a good pitch, isn't it? As well, I think it's well. Yeah, I find that very inspiring. By dwelling in awareness of the Buddha, we become more Buddha in all the many different dimensions. Okay. So on to the second and last story. So we're back in India in January 2025. And so, yes, those of us on this pilgrimage, we're now on a long coach journey. We had lots of long coach journeys. Yes, many, many long coach journeys. The whole thing was pretty much done by coach. So full days of travel. And on this particular day, we knew we were heading to the place where the Buddha passed away, where the Buddha died or attained parinirvana, as it said, a place called Kushinaga. And of all the places we'd visited so far, this one felt to me like the weightiest. It had the weightiest build-up, a kind of air of solemnity. Solemnity? Solemnity, that's it. Thank you. You were a very supportive audience, thank you. Solemnity and weighty sense of, wow, this is a serious, not in the like unpleasant sense, but this is the big thing we're doing, going to Kushinaga, to where the Buddha passed away. We were all set the homework of listening to the Sangharakshita talk, where he speaks about this event, Between Twin Sal Trees, it's called. And yes, and again, like for me, we weren't just preparing to visit the site where the Buddha died. In my mind, we were going there to actually witness the great passing ourselves, to go to where it happened, to actually be there, again, tapping into this like wormhole phenomena, so that we ourselves would be there witnessing the great passing of the Buddha with this great assembly. And I was preparing to lead the ritual. I'd been asked if I would be up for leading the ritual, which felt very weighty. Again, using this word a lot, but it felt like a big responsibility. And yeah, interestingly, so we arrived at the place we were staying the night before. It was a monastery, a Tibetan monastery that was used. We had lots of guest houses. And I was sort of preparing, the night before, preparing our team, the pilgrims, thinking, how can we get into the atmosphere and the mood, of seeing witnessing the great passing of the Buddha. Well, maybe we should be going into silence. And anyway, I didn't quite make that decision, walked out, and then a dance party erupted. And there was this music blasting out. And basically a bunch of Ambedkarite Buddhists had they were on pilgrimage. And the way they do pilgrimage is wherever they go, they party, basically. And apparently this is what happens. They were there with the sound system. And, this monastery was literally right next door to the Parinirvana Stupa. It was just over the wall, getting all solemn and ready. And then they were just dancing, partying, having a great time. We were dancing like a snake and doing all kinds of, Shubham knew all the moves. He had knew all the dances and all the actions, and there was dance-offs and all sorts. Anyway, we were just like a bunch of us joining in. I'm not quite sure why I'm telling you this. It doesn't quite directly... Anyway, it was perfect. It was the perfect preparation. Felt light and free and kind of human, and went to bed feeling jolly and merry, and then woke up ready to do what needed to be done and to witness the Buddha's parinirvana. So in the morning, we walked in silence to the site. We set up our meditation gear by the great stupa and temple. The great stupa marking the spot where the Buddha passed away, where he entered parinirvana. And yes, so the ritual began, and there we were 2,500 years ago, sitting among the great assembly, surrounded by monks, nuns, Dharma practitioners from all walks of life. Even all the animals were gathered around, all the different animals and birds. Above us were swirling thousands of beings of light, the devas, all showering the Buddha with offerings. And the Buddha was there, lying on his right-hand side, with blossoms out of season showering down from the trees around him, the 2 trees to his side. And the scene unfolded. We saw Ananda, his closest friend and attendant of many years, sneaking away to lean against a doorpost without thinking no one was watching, while he wept tears, exclaiming, "Alas, I am a pupil with much to be done, and my master will be passing utterly away, he who was so kind to me." And we watched the many thousands of beings around us as the Buddha entered into deeper and deeper levels of absorption and meditative concentration, until finally it happened. But what happened? So somewhere at this point, and in the hour or two to come, I became increasingly aware of the inevitability of death, in a way more so than I ever had done before, interestingly. By being in the presence of the Buddha and the Buddha's death, I felt more aware of death than I ever had done before. And what a mystery it is, and what a mystery the Buddha is. All of this was sort of happening at the same time. I could feel this longing within me for the greatest and highest happiness, security, and meaning in life. I could feel all of that there. This longing we all share to be free. And it was so direct and immediate and clear that the Buddha had done that. He was there, he'd done it. He'd reached that. There he was. And yet he still died. He still died. So this was all churning within me as we processed around the temple. And at this point, we each had a hand on a giant golden cloth. So we all had a hand on this great, big, giant golden cloth, holding it up together in 2 lines, processing around the temple, which we did 3 times, very slowly, took a long time, whilst chanting this hauntingly beautiful Shakyamuni mantra. And we were carrying this golden cloth. We knew it was, we were building up to eventually taking it to the Buddha and covering the Buddha with this great cloth, a deeply symbolic act. And I continued to feel this sense that even after reaching, this sense of even the Buddha, after reaching the greatest and highest in security, liberation in life, even after doing that, death will still come. And yet, at the same time, the Buddha, who the Buddha really was, didn't actually die. Not really, not literally. Not who the Buddha really was. So, yes, in the presence of the Buddha, these 2 realities seemingly presenting themselves one, there is no way to escape death. No way to escape death. Witnessing the Buddha's passing, this seemed more true than ever, Not even the Buddha could escape death. And yet mysteriously and wonderfully at the same time, within that truth of the inevitability of death lies something that is deathless. Something that who the Buddha really is, there's something of the deathless element there. The Buddha, who the Buddha really was, did not die and was never born. Apparently, when asked what happens to a Buddha when he dies, the Buddha refused to say any of those things. He said, well, it's not true to say a Buddha dies. It's not true to say a Buddha doesn't die. Or neither, or both. So, yes. And this is true. So this is true for the Buddha. It's true for awareness with a capital A, not just our mundane awareness, but sort of what we might say our truest and deepest nature, who we really are, our Buddha nature, also has this deathless element. So that state or dimension of existence that whether we know it or not, we so long deeply to get hold of, that final lasting liberation, we so long to get hold of it, while at the same time, it can never be gotten hold of. Sangharakshita puts this quite mysteriously and paradoxically by saying, enlightenment is attained outside of time. Or the attainment happens outside of time. And it's more, the experience is more waking up to realizing that that's already happened, or it's kind of always been the case. Which isn't to say we're already enlightened. That's, Can't get away with that one. But we all have this capacity to wake up to this. Though it takes effort, but we all have this capacity, and it's our birthright. And it is the Buddha. It is reality. And all the time we spend dwelling in awareness of the Buddha, it's as if we're opening a channel to this, which is our true nature, the Buddha being who we truly and deeply are in our truest essence. Creating a channel to allow something of the nectar, the deathless nectar to flow through. So, finally, we're carrying the golden cloth. We entered the temple, still chanting, still carrying this, felt like, brightly shining piece of fabric. And there was the Buddha lying there on his right-hand side in the lion's posture. We walked around him, slowly stepped forwards to place the cloth over him, laid it down, and then let go. And that evening, what I want to finish with is something I wrote that evening, actually. So, I really want to share this. It's a little bit strange. So, what I did that evening is a way to kind of assimilate what we'd done that day and what sort of happened between us. I wanted to write something. So I thought, what I'm going to do is I'm going to imagine that I am the cloth, the great golden cloth. And what would the cloth say if it was writing in his diary? From the cloth's perspective, as if it was, alive and conscious. And so I just got my pen out and just started writing. And this is what I wrote, and it's completely unedited, so it's not literature. But nonetheless, I want to share it because I feel like it captures something. And that'll be the end of the talk. So this is the cloth speaking. They carried me so gently. Some held firm, others with some nervousness. Some pinched, others gripped. But they all held me and carried all of me far from the ground, up and around. I sensed from their pace that there was nowhere particular we were anxious to get to. But nonetheless, we were definitely heading somewhere, to a place that can only be reached by taking the long way. Their voices rang out, vibrating my fibers. I'm sure I must have been even more golden than when the Indian man had me in his van. Then he appeared, the one they'd been walking for so long and so slowly to find. Suddenly I became aware of myself, or more perhaps, I became aware that my time had come. They opened me right out. I'd never felt so expansive, so light, so on the edge of greatness. I floated over him, right over him. Then the moment came. As they laid me down over his body, one by one, yet so suddenly their hands released me to my final duty. I held and embraced the Blessed One, like reunited lovers. Together we would hold one another. I am now his cloak of glory. His journey is complete, and I am his victory banner. My gold will never diminish. His light will always shine through me. I'm so grateful.
We hope you enjoyed this week's podcast. Please help us keep this free. Make a contribution at freebuddhistaudio.com/donate. And thank you